Hello. If you're a Christian or if you're a Christian missionary and you are led to believe by your colleagues and missionaries to the Jews that they don't prey on Jews, that they are sensitive to the Jewish people, that they don't take advantage of any Jewish person to get them to believe in Jesus or anything like this, then I hope you will pay attention to the following, which I'm telling you, which is the truth. Because you have to make your mind up whether I am telling the truth. But it happened to me. I was a Jewish believer in Jesus for 42 years. I look younger than I am. I came to faith at the age of 18, and then I am now age 60. We're going back to 1994, not that long ago. I was visiting a missionary at their home. This was a missionary employed by a United Kingdom missionary organisation, part-time. I don't know if they get paid, I presume so, I'm not sure, I never asked. I'd known this person a number of years, because by that time I had been a Jewish believer in Jesus for many years. I'd gone for lunch and there was supposed to be a prayer meeting, praying to save for the Jewish people to be saved, and I was there. Very few people ever go to these. There was one other lady. That was it. You just very few people then. Very few. I can remember this conversation. I can remember where it was held and everything. The missionary was cooking spaghetti. And they were trying to cook spaghetti in an inch of water. Right. So this missionary is not a very good cook. And so I tactfully said, I think you're going to need more water than this, to cover up the spaghetti. It needs to be covered up totally with water for it to get softer. The missionary said, well, I'm a lousy cook anyway. And this didn't surprise me because this particular missionary couldn't receive correction from anybody. They are, very arrogant, and I was just being very tactful and saying, I think you need more water to cover that spaghetti, because the missionary was putting loads and loads of spaghetti in an inch water high of water. And I said, it's got to be covered. And the missionary ignored what I said. The missionary knew cooking was my hobby. I loved cooking. The missionary knew that. But the missionary ignored me. And I'm going to cook it like this, so people have to just make do with it. So the missionary ignored the obvious of covering up the spaghetti. And I'm supposed to eat this stuff. I didn't eat it. I couldn't eat it. It was rock hard. It was awful. I'm telling you this at the beginning to show you, give you an insight into the character of this person. Because it's unbelievable, isn't it? Unbelievable that what I said was totally dismissed, and they carried on, knowing and the missionary knew that what was put on the plate was inedible. They knew it was inedible, and everybody around the table was looking at it and said, "How are we going to eat this? It's rock hard, and it's all it's curled up, but it's rock hard. You'd have to chew it." And that's what some of the family were doing. They were chewing it, crunch, crunch, crunch. Can you believe it? Uncooked spaghetti. You get indigestion, so that's why I didn't eat it. And I tried to sort of correct them in a nice way. Oh, I think you'll need more water. And I was totally ignored. So that reveals an awful lot about the person to begin with. The missionary told me this. I couldn't believe it. They started talking about it. I was just sitting there watching the missionary put spaghetti in half an inch of water. What had happened, the missionary had got a phone call from the YMCA. That's the Young Man's Christian Association, right? In the United Kingdom, they have, as they do around the world, hostels for men, and they also do have some for women, one or two for women, but this was for men. And they staying there for any number of reasons. So a little old lady, I got the impression, or some volunteer at the YMCA had rung the missionary and said, we've got a Jewish boy staying. So you're saying, how do they know it was a Jewish boy? Well, it turns out he looked very Jewish. He had a Jewish look. Some people do look very, very Jewish. He looked very, very Jewish. And so they could, I don't know, he had a Jewish surname as well, but he looked very, very Jewish. So we've got a Jewish boy staying here. So you know what the missionary did? The missionary went to the YMCA where the boy was staying and started to befriend him. Well, how would she do that, you're asking? Well, she started saying, oh, I've been to Israel. They start talking about Israel. Well, most Jewish people have been to Israel. I haven't been yet because of health reasons. I can never seem to get. There's always something in the way that prevents me. Oh, I was in Israel, so-and-so. Were you? Yes. I went to so-and-so. Have you? Oh, yes, I've been to so-and-so. What did you think? So they start talking about Israel. And you know what it's like if you visited a foreign country, you're talking, oh, you went here, you went there, what did you think, what did you think? So you kind of bond, don't you? A little bit. There's a little bit of a bond. That is one of the goals of the missionaries, to bond with the client, to create a bond. To make that nice and friendly, you know, easy and chatty, bonding. So she then, the missionary then says, what, you know, why are you here? So remember, this missionary was middle-aged. This boy was about 20. So this is like an older person. You know what it's like when you're a teenager, late teens, early 20s. Sometimes it does help to unload your problems on a more mature person who is not connected to the family or anything. It's like, you know, a mature sort of counsellor, somebody who can give you, who's sympathetic, but perhaps can give you some good advice because they're older than you, right? I mean, I remember that from my teens and 20s. You'd go to a nice older person who, you know, was interested and they could give you advice how to do this and how to do that. So he pours his heart out, and what it is, he's living at home with his mum and dad, and his dad wants him to go into business with him, right? Now the son doesn't want to go into business, right, with his father. He wants to do something else. Well, this is you know the eternal problem with father saying, what is it? Is my business not good enough for you? You think you're better than my business, do you? I started from the age of 16 and I built up this business, and now you don't want to work with my business and you think you're too good for my business, and what's wrong with my business, and who do you think you are? And I've raised you and I thought I expected you to run my business. Oh, yeah. I don't know I can't remember what he wanted to do, the son, but he obviously wanted to do something different. So there's a big argument. So he's the only son, which is more pressurised, isn't it? So he has a breathing space. He goes and stays in the YMCA hostel. I suppose he's trying to decide what to do, you see. And here you've got this middle-aged person. Oh, tell me what, you know, they're all smiley and understanding and sweetness and light. So he tells the missionary everything. Now, the missionary does invite this Jewish boy, to a home. I do know that, the missionary told me that. I can't remember how long the actual contact relationship lasted. It would have been an absolute minimum of 6 weeks, of 3 to 6 weeks. Or was it, I'm trying to remember. It was a minimum of 3 weeks, and I think a maximum of 6 weeks, right? So it was a minimum of 3 weeks and a maximum of 6 weeks. So this had been good. To invite him to a home, I presume she invited him for a meal. That's the kind of thing you do, isn't it? Because he's staying in a hostel, and he would like a nice home-cooked meal. Well, he wouldn't want what the missionary was giving up, uncooked spaghetti, but you know. So there was a relationship going on, contact, regular contact, which was a minimum of 3 weeks or a maximum of 6 weeks. And at no time during that encounter did the missionary tell that Jewish boy that they were a missionary, employed part-time by a missionary organisation in the United Kingdom. So I'm listening to all this, and I'm thinking I must be very careful what I say here, because I assumed that the missionary was telling me this because they felt bad about it, and perhaps, you know, when you've done something wrong and you feel bad about it and you want to tell somebody, the worst thing that you can possibly do in a situation like that is say, well, it's your own fault, you know what people can be like. So I've got to watch my words very carefully, because if she's feeling really bad about this, it's not going to be very constructive. I start going on and on laying into her, because if she's feeling bad about it, then she's obviously learnt a lesson. So it's not going to help me going on and on. I've got to be very, very measured with my words and think very carefully how I answer. So I'm sitting there listening, not making any judgment, shocked, very, very shocked, but thinking, wait till the end, wait till I've heard everything. Be very, very careful here, because I am waiting for her to say something like, I feel so bad about what I've done. I've been thinking about it and I feel terrible. That's what I was waiting to hear. That did not happen. What happened, she told me, was this boy, this Jewish boy, found out, possibly from the other ladies at the YMCA, because they're obviously quite gossipy, aren't they, because they'd wronged the missionary, the Jewish missionary. He found out that this person who'd been invited, befriended him, that had been inviting him to their home, was in fact a missionary employed by a missionary organisation. And this Jewish boy was very angry, I suspect, and very upset. Because when people are angry in a situation, they're also upset and hurt. They'd be very, very hurt. Because remember, he thought that this person was somebody he could trust and that cared about him, wanted to help him with his problem with his father, with what to do with this specific. And then suddenly to find he was being preyed upon by a missionary. They hadn't even told him that they were missionary, nothing. It would be awful. And it was like he severed all contact with the missionary and wanted nothing more to do with the missionary. And so the missionary is telling me this as they're putting in piles and piles of spaghetti into 1 inch of water in the pan on the stove. And they're looking very sheepish. You know, like they've done something, they know it's wrong, but you know, it's like a little bit of a grin across the face. You know, it's like, I've done something a bit naughty here, like that. And this was what shocked me. And the missionary did not say what I expected him to say, like, I shouldn't have done it, I thought about it afterwards, I was wrong to do it, I feel bad about it, what do you think I should do? Do you think I should write a letter of apology? Should I leave it? I thought that this is perhaps, so she might have been wanting to get my opinion in order of how to handle it. Perhaps the missionary realised they had made a big blunder. Where do I go? Well, I can't see her this missionary asking me for advice. They're too arrogant. But again, I was being very careful, wanting to hear everything before opening my mouth. But it was quite obvious that the missionary did not take this seriously. It was the attitude of the missionary was, I know I shouldn't have done it. It was a sheepish look, you know. I know I shouldn't have done it really, but I did it. And unfortunately I got caught. And the attitude was, I'll have to be more careful next time. Right. So it wasn't a case of, I've done this and I've realised it's wrong and I mustn't do it again. It was a case of, I did it. I knew I shouldn't have really done it, but I did it. And I got caught. But let's hope when I do it again, I don't get caught. That was the attitude that came across to me. And I was thoroughly disgusted. Now, so you're saying, what did you say? How did you handle it? Well, I'll be very honest with you. At that time, the way I was at that time in my development, I couldn't have spoken so um, honestly and to say exactly what I think then. I would have, this missionary, I think I would have, I didn't know how to handle it. I mean, I do now, but that was the kind, I was quite different in that respect. And it's also the second thing, it's very difficult when you're a guest in somebody's home and they're cooking you rock hard spaghetti in a pan. They're actually offering you hospitality even though it's gross. And I knew that this was a long-serving missionary. This is a long-serving missionary. You have to remember, this is not a 20-year-old who's got over-enthusiastic. This is a mature, middle-aged missionary who spent their life being a missionary to the Jews. And they know that that behaviour is just not on. Doing things like that is not on. And I'm thinking, what can I say? But the missionary already doesn't know, because they already know it's wrong. They already know they shouldn't be doing it. Now I would tackle the missionary head on, and I would argue with them. I wouldn't be the least bit scared. I would really, whoo, 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 whoo. But not then, I couldn't do it. I wasn't, it wasn't the kind of person I was. I wasn't able to do it. I was too timid, I think. I was too scared. I just didn't have the bottle. Whatever. I'd be too intimidated by the person and things like that. But I'm not like that now. I have changed quite a lot in that respect. And now I would speak out, and now I would just, what the hell do you think you're playing at? You know it's wrong. I wouldn't mess about now. And then I just walk out of the house. Never mind the spaghetti. I just walk out of the house. I would give that person a piece of my mind now. But I was a different kind of person now. Quite different in that respect. And I'm telling you this because I want you to understand that this is the very missionary who will go around churches, your church, who's somebody you could be working with, and they are saying we must be sensitive to the Jewish people. We must do things ethically. We mustn't do things that are, wrong. We mustn't prey on the elderly. We mustn't prey on, underage children. We mustn't, we must be full of integrity and do our job properly and not take advantage of the weak and vulnerable. This missionary would say those very things. So the missionary that is saying these very things is the very missionary that did this. And this is what I want you to grasp. I want you to grasp this. You see, people talk the talk, but they're not necessarily always walking the walk. And we all know it's easier to tell people what you should be doing, but you don't necessarily always do it yourself. And I think this is a classic situation, because a missionary would know that what they were doing was wrong. They should not have gone to that YMCA. They should have said, and they had the bowls and the bottle to say to the lady at the YMCA, thank you for ringing me and telling me this, but I must tell you, you mustn't do this again, because we're not allowed to go and just visit somebody like that on spec, in a situation like this where they're vulnerable, and these, in a vulnerable situation, these younger, we're not, we can't do this. We can't just go sort of introduce, going up to people like this in this situation when they're vulnerable, at a vulnerable point in their lives. And please don't ring me again if you get any other Jewish person staying at the hostel, because I'm not going to do anything. But they didn't do that. They didn't do that. They went to the hostel, YMCA hostel, but they didn't tell the boy that they were a missionary. And this is the point you have to get on, have to grasp. This was a person employed by a missionary organisation. That is their job part-time. This is not an over-enthusiastic Christian, just, feeling they've been called by God to share with the Jewish people. Right, this is somebody, that's their job. And they know part of their job description is not to do that. Right, because when you're in employment, everybody has their job description. You all know what you're supposed to do in your job and what you're not supposed to do in your job. And all Christian missionaries know they must not pray, go into a situation like that. And if they do speak to anybody, they must announce themselves as I am a missionary. You've got to be straight up with people. And I'll tell you something, even though I don't believe in Jesus and anything, anymore, I have to tell you that if you're on it, what annoys the Jewish people is dishonesty. If you're honest and upfront and say, look, I am a missionary, I'm a missionary to the Jews, and I want to tell you about why I think Jesus is the Messiah. If you're upfront with them like that, then they will respect you more as an individual, because at least they're being honest with us. They're telling us from the start exactly who they are, what they're about, and what they're trying to achieve, right? But it's when it goes underhand and it's devious and they're not telling you who they are. Because as far as this young lad was concerned, this was just a nice, possibly vaguely in his mind, he's thinking a Christian lady. But he's not thinking Christian as terms of, this is a Christian lady out to convert me to Christianity. He's just thinking she's just not Jewish. Because that's how Jewish people think. Oh, she's just, she seems like a nice lady. She probably goes to church. It doesn't mean I can't talk to her. Because she could just be a nice lady, a nice non-Jewish lady who happens to have a Christian faith, and there's no reason why I shouldn't talk to her. But it's when the person is bent on trying to convert you, and that is the goal of the relationship. And unfortunately, this is what a lot of evangelical Christians are encouraged to do, is to build relationships with Jewish people through friendship, to try and build up the friendship, and then when you've got all nice and friendly, then to share your faith in Jesus. Right, so the whole motive of the relationship is to share Jesus. And you remember, I understand your point of view because I thought like you for 42 years. And from your point of view, you think, well, there's no harm in this because this is the most important thing to you on the planet. I suppose the first point I would say to you is, if you do insist on doing that, at least be straight up and honest with the person from the very beginning. From the very beginning. And if the person says they don't want to have this discussion with you about Jesus, or they don't want to discuss it, you've got to accept it, and you mustn't push it. Everybody has the right to say no, right? And you have to have the good grace to accept it. And you mustn't insist on your own way, because as Christians you're not supposed to be insisting on your own way anyway. If you remember your scriptures from your New Testament, you're not supposed to be forcing yourself on people. You just offer it. Would you like a piece of cake? No thanks, no thanks. Okay. It's exactly the same. If somebody started saying, go on, have a piece of cake, and the person said, no, really, I don't want a piece of cake. Go on, have a piece of cake. You wouldn't like it, would you? You think, well, I don't want somebody to have a piece of cake, I don't want a piece of cake. This is what it's like if you keep on insisting and telling that person about Yeshua, about Jesus and everything else. You have got to just, if you insist on offering it, the information, you must have the good grace to accept and take it in a good spirit if people say I'm not interested. What happened yesterday was the doorbell rang, and it happened I always put the latch key on my door because I live alone. I always put the key at the top, And so I opened the door, and it's the lock, the door lock thing, the chain, the chain across. And something was thrust in between the gap. It's like a crocodile. Right in there. In between. Right in there. It was a pamphlet. Right. From a missionary. She was standing there. She shoved it in. She was really, really quick there. The chain didn't put her off. She was really savage. She was right in there with the leaflet. Right through. Underneath the chain. No chain was going to stop her. Right. It's like I'm being invaded. by this leaflet into my home. She's so determined to get that leaflet into my home. She's going under the chain. I open the door and it's going under the chain, the leaflet. Underneath. Right? I didn't take it. I said, I'm not interested. I'm not interested. I'm not interested. I said, the third time I said it, there was a bit more firmness in my voice. At first I said, I'm not interested. And I said, I'm not interested. And then the third time, I'm not interested. And then there's that slight edge to my voice. And do you know what she did? She took the leaflet back. She took the leaflet back. It was brilliant. It was over in, 20 seconds. It was brilliant. That is the quickest up to now. That is a world record for me. Of dealing with a missionary that quick. It was brilliant. Brilliant. I thought that was easy. That was easy. And so what I am telling you is the truth. I wanted to report this missionary at the time. I wanted to report the missionary, but I was in conflict, I'll be honest with you, at the time, because I recognised that this missionary had been devoted all their lives to trying to share the gospel with Jewish people, with Jesus and everything. I was a Jewish believer in Jesus. And I thought it was a very difficult situation, because I knew what they'd done was wrong. But I'm thinking, first of all, I didn't think the missionary organisation would believe me. That was the first thing. They wouldn't believe me. The second thing, I knew this missionary would lie through the teeth. I knew it. They would just totally deny that they'd had that conversation with me. They'd say no, that I'd misunderstood them, that they didn't say that. They would just deny everything. Because I had further experiences with this particular missionary, and the missionary did lie. So I knew I'd have problems with this missionary before. I knew they would lie. And it would just what's to be achieved. And I didn't necessarily want this missionary to be sacked, to be honest. I just wanted this missionary to understand that they must do what they're supposed to be doing and do their job with integrity. And that what they'd done was wrong, and they knew it was wrong. But you see, I think the thing is with missionaries is they can get so driven. They are very, very driven. To be a missionary, you have to be driven. You have to be a self-starter. You have to be a self-motivator. It's no different going door to door selling double glazing. You have to be out there on your own. It's not like going into work every day where you clock in and there's a boss and there's an office or there's a structure. I mean, these people often come, like in the United Kingdom, they're working on their own. They're basically working on their own. They're ringing into the head office. So obviously they have somebody above them, but they're not seeing the boss every day. They might see the boss perhaps 4 or 5 times a year. They're basically left to it. They get on with the job, right? They organise their day as they see fit. They're really not, on a day-to-day basis, they're not accountable to anybody. They have to sort of ring into the head office and perhaps they have to do worksheets and things. I went to so-and-so to give a talk, I went to so-and-so to give a talk. That sort of general thing. But in terms of on a daily basis, that they're on their own and they're not being challenged, you see. And people don't know what they're doing. That if she hadn't told me, I wouldn't have known. It was a missionary who told me this information. But you see, if I can think of another missionary who used to be, a big macher. I don't want to embarrass him, because this is just my impressions and thoughts. But I am pretty certain that if I told this big shot in the Jewish Christian world what that missionary had done, they'd just smile. They would know it. They shouldn't be doing it, but they wouldn't say anything. They would not comment on it. They just smile sheepishly. A bit like her, sort of like they know they shouldn't do it, but they'll still do it. If they get the opportunity, they'll do it. They'll do it because they're so driven. It's about saving souls, and you have to understand this. It is about saving souls. It's literally trying to prevent somebody from going into the fires of hell. You have to. This is possibly. This is how you have to. You've got to get inside their minds as a mindset. Also, does that because they're self-starters and missionaries are very determined, and it's also about winning arguments, isn't it? There's some people that have to win an argument, don't they? They have to have the last word. And the missionaries, well, some of them, not all of them, but some I've noticed over the years, they're very, very driven. They're very, very driven. And they have to be right. They have to win the argument. They have to be right. They have to get that person converted. They are so, so, so driven, you see. It's not like laissez-faire. It's not like, well, I'll just tell people if they don't want it, it's all right, I'm not bothered. No, they're so driven. And it's the fact that they're so driven that causes them, I think, to behave in unethical ways. They know what they're doing at the time is wrong, but they will take advantage. You know, like they do prey on the elderly. They do prey, perhaps, on people who are mentally ill. I remember another missionary, he was very, very nice young man. I liked him. He was a very nice, sincere man. But you have to question the wisdom of it. He was in conversation with a Jewish man who was a chronic schizophrenic. And he was in a very, very bad place mentally. He probably was the sort of person that should have been in hospital. I trained as a psychiatric nurse. Probably 40 years ago, he would have been in hospital. 40 years ago, he would have been in hospital. But because of changes in the United Kingdom, he's living in the community. And he's talking with this missionary regularly. And, you know, you have to question the wisdom of that for a missionary engaging with somebody who is so severely mentally ill, right? You have to question the wisdom of it. Personally, now at the age of 60, I would probably say to that missionary, I just wouldn't get involved with that. I'd stay away if I were you. Don't get involved with somebody who's mentally ill like that. You know, that's my thoughts. I just think it moves into the area of the vulnerable. It moves into the area of taking advantage of, say, somebody who's very severely mentally handicapped, or the very old person on their own, isolated. I would say don't go there. That's my thoughts. He obviously had a different opinion. He possibly thought, well, I'm just giving him the facts and it's up to him, he can make his mind up. I don't think the Jewish community would regard it like that. They would say this is a very seriously mentally ill man, very, 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 very sick, and you shouldn't even be meeting up with him. You shouldn't be meeting up with him, and I would tend to agree with that. So, and I've never heard discussions. I was a Jewish believer in Jesus for 42 years. I've never heard any discussions or debate about this whole area. I don't think people know what vulnerable is, for one thing. I don't think they know the definition of vulnerable. They don't talk about it openly. Nothing's talked about of the ethics of what they're doing, and of when it's appropriate to talk to somebody and when it's not appropriate. When it's appropriate to raise a conversation about Jesus being the Messiah, if he's the Messiah, with a Jewish person, and when it's not. You know, I would say it's not appropriate with children, it's not appropriate with the mentally handicapped, it's not appropriate with the mentally ill, nobody with any mental illness. I know the elderly, people living on the road. Actually, there's so many categories of people, I would say, but these are the very categories of people that missionaries prey on. And these are the people that get converted to Christianity. Because while I was a Jewish believer in Jesus, I remember I used to think to myself, why is it there's so many people, the Jewish believers, seem to be what's called vulnerable? They're coming to faith at a very young age. and it's so, for instance, one Jewish believer, she came to faith at the age of 16 and is going to church, at the age of 16. It's very young. Um, at 16, Professor Michael Brown at 16 was going to church. His father knew and left him, you know. Um, um, People with mental health problems, severe mental health problems, very severe, believing in Jesus, suicidal people believing in Jesus. It does seem to, because they're the only people probably that will open the doors to these missionaries and to the earnest evangelical Christian that's trying to convert the Jewish person, you see. And it's people on their own. It's the widows, widowers, people with chronic health problems, housebound. Somebody like me. I mean, I'm housebound most of the time because of my illness and things like that. I am a typical one they would seek to prey on. And they do, and the churches do. I remember a Jewish lady, and she was like, how I remember talking to her 30 years ago, and she was like how I am now. She was housebound, very unwell, couldn't get out and about on her own, and they would be coming to her house. She let them in, but she was very astute, and she was using them actually. She was quite smart because she was housebound and in poor health. They were willing to take her to church and take her to Christmas parties and things like that. Now, this was a lady on her own, housebound, chronically sick, and she's just found the whole thing a joke. She wasn't taking it seriously at all. She kind of indicated that to me. She said, well, if they want to take me to church, I go and have mince pies and coffee and listen to carol singers. But there's no way she's going to believe in Jesus. But they don't know that. But that's what she was saying. So she was playing them at their own game. She was being smart and savvy and thinking, I'm going to use these people because I can get them to take me out here, there, and everywhere. And for her, I think she just found it interesting and amusing. I think she found it entertaining. She wasn't taking it seriously, what they were saying to her. She just found the whole thing like a form of entertainment, coming to her home, telling her all about Jesus and telling her this and telling her that. And this is a woman who's not well. She's chronically sick. She's isolated. She can't get out and about. But her brain's all right. And she's thinking, oh, well, it's a bit of company for an hour or two. And she just finds the whole thing entertaining. Oh, we'll take you to church on Sunday. We've got so-and-so speaking. So she goes along and she's thinking, well, it's a night out. But they think that she's about to give her heart to Jesus. She's not going to give her heart to Jesus. She's basically indicated to me when I asked her about this on the phone, it's like, no, I'm not interested. I'm just like, I'm using them. They're using me. I'm using them. I get a free transport to a night out listening to people singing songs and getting free mince pies and coffees and having a little chat with people about this, that, the other. I'm looking at it from her point of view. You can't blame her. You can't blame her, but she's got her wits about her. There's no way she is going to believe in this Jesus business. And I think it's the same with other old ladies as well, because I've done a lot of visiting of old ladies during my life. That's been my life, visiting old ladies. And what people underestimate about old ladies is they might be frail physically. They might forget the shopping list, and they might forget if they've ordered eggs, they might forget if they've got coffee, and they might forget this and the other. But they don't forget one thing: there is only one God, and we Jews only believe in one God, and we don't worship idols. And we don't believe in Jesus. They might not know what's on the shopping list, they might not know what day it is, but they know you don't worship idols, you don't worship Jesus. And so you've got these missionaries preying on them. And they get nowhere with some of these little old ladies. And these missionaries and Christians from churches can't understand it. But I understand it, because these little old ladies know their faith. They're Jewish. They know there's only one God. We worship one God. We don't bow down to idols. And they are very, very sceptical of this Christianity thing. And it's so deep within them. Their faith is so entrenched and so deep from childhood. They know who they are and what they're supposed to believe and what they're not supposed to believe as Jews, that even though they're moving into dementia, it's incredible. You won't get them believing in Jesus. They won't. They won't. I've seen it. I've had I remember conversation. And it's fascinating. And it's wonderful, really, that a person in that state, physical, mental state, deterioration, that still they hold on to their firm religious faith principles. They know what they must not believe in. They can't remember things. They don't know what day it is. They don't even know what your name is. They've forgotten. But they do know there's only one God, and they mustn't worship Jesus. And they know Christians worship Jesus, and they won't worship him. And they won't believe in him. And the Christians from the churches are going in befriending these little old ladies. And they don't realise that these old ladies are not going to give way. It doesn't matter how much they go on at them. These little old ladies will stand firm. I've seen it. It's amazing. It's incredible. It is fantastic, really, when you think about it. And I think it's fantastic that that a human being, even though they're deteriorating physically and mentally, that they still have, they still can hold true and hold strong to what they believe in, their personal faith principles. There's only one God. I only believe in one God. I only worship one God. And I don't worship this Jesus. And I personally think it's incredible. I think it's wonderful. And it's brilliant that God has created human beings with the capacity to hold on to what they believe is right and true for them, and not be swayed and moved away because they're deteriorating mentally and physically. But of course this is not always the case, which is the point what I'm getting at, is some people are easily swayed. Some people are easily swayed. Some people just come to faith because the people are so nice. And they can be very nice. Christians, very, very nice. Very, very nice. But the fact that people are very, very nice to you doesn't mean you have to believe what they believe. I mean, as a Jewish person, I know there's lots of lovely Buddhists out there. There's lots of lovely atheists out there. There's lots of lovely Muslims out there. But I'm not going to believe what they believe just because they're lovely people. I can acknowledge they're lovely, lovely people, and I can be so happy to be friends with them, enjoy the company. It doesn't mean I need to believe what they believe. And to be honest, I'm not requiring that they believe what I believe. You see, people can believe in all sorts of crazy things, and yet they can be wonderful, wonderful, lovely, salt of the earth people. And I think this is another problem that people think, is they think because these Christians are so nice, so caring, so this, so that, that they must therefore believe what they believe. But I would say no, it doesn't make sense. I mean, if you're a member of the Labour Party, you possibly know people in the Conservative Party who you're absolutely great friends with. You really, you might socialise, you have a laugh and a joke, you think politically totally differently, but you really like the person, you respect them, you get on together, you have a laugh, you go out, you socialise. There's a good humoured respect, that you respect each other's position, that you think differently. But a Labour person isn't going to become a Conservative because their friend is a Conservative, and vice versa. You just respect, there's mutual respect, that you think differently on certain things, but on other things you're in agreement. And that's how it is in politics. And that's how it can be often, you see, in British politics, where people of different political parties. I remember a lady from the Labour Party saying this on television. She says, we don't argue all the time in Parliament when we're discussing things. We don't argue all the time. She says, we have to work together because on so many issues we're actually in agreement, and we want the best for the public. We've all got different ideas of how it should be done, but we're not actually at each other's throats all the time. And she says that there are so many issues where we're all, although we're politically different in so many other aspects, we're actually in agreement. You know, we all want the elderly to be protected. We all want, you know, to take crime seriously. We all, you know, we're all concerned about children being abused. In other words, we have more in common than we have not in common. And she says we do actually, a lot of us get on together and we like each other, we get on, but we're not arguing all the time. And I suppose I have diversed a little bit from the beginning. I hope you feel all this is relevant. And so I never did report this lady, this missionary, to the organisation. However, not long after, I did have to take legal action against the missionary to forbid the missionary contacting me anymore. And that is another story. But I took legal action, and after I took legal action against this particular missionary, I never heard from them ever again. And I don't want to hear from them ever again.